Happy 2025, lords and ladies. A new year means another golden demon right around the corner. But with what it's become, is it even worth it anymore? I look at miniature painting competitions as a way for me to gauge for myself how much I've grown as a miniature painter over a year. You see, every model that you paint over that year is making you a better painter. It doesn't matter if it's a speed paint, if it's painting a unit for your army, or you're trying your hardest. But how much better have those paint jobs made you over the year? The only way to really test is to try your hardest on a single model. And that's where I think competitions are invaluable. But there is a very uncool trend that's happening, especially at Golden Demon. There are guys that paint 1 or 2 models for the entire year, and they take the full 12 months, 500 plus hours on one model, and they enter it in the competition. To me, that's the definition of insanity, and it sucks all the fun out of this hobby, but it is a rising tide. More and more painters that want to compete at Golden Demon feel that they need to only paint a few models for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours over the course of the year if they have any chance to compete. Why? There is no money on the line here in these competitions. There's no timeshare in Scottsdale or a 2013 Ford Fiesta on the line here. But you and me, we're not crazy. So after a year of painting fun models, I'm going to sit down for this year's Golden Demon paint job and spend a reasonable amount of hours on my Golden Demon entry. This year I decided to paint a big old monster. I've painted big monsters for the Resin Beast competition back in 2019 and 2020 and really enjoyed it, but haven't painted anything to this size for a number of years. And if you watch the first video in this series where I built his base, you'll know that this year's muse is Visic Scour. I got his face 90% completed and got a good start on his horns at a weekend paint jam at Vince Venturella's house, but I really need to knock out a large section of this model in order to get some momentum built up if I'm going to have any hope of finishing this in time for Golden Demon. You know, I'm not one that believes that you need to have it all figured out before you start painting, even for a competition piece. But I do like to have one goal for my Golden Demon entry each year. And this year, my goal is saturation and vibrancy. I want this model to really be striking under the lights, even though it gets all washed out in the display cases at Golden Demon. So to set myself up for that vibrancy, I'm not priming this model black. I'm priming it a light gray, and then I'm going right in with the biggest brush that I own and start wet blending the initial tones on his skin. I'm going out of my way not to include any colors that have a lot of black or white pigment in them, especially from the get-go. This way, we're not going to have desaturated colors even in the shadows and even in our brighter areas. I'm also not starting with a lot of dark colors in general. I find it's a lot easier to start brighter and more vibrant and pull down the tones with shadows later than it is to start with dark and try to build up those brightness even in midtones. I don't know exactly how this is going to turn out in the end, but you know what? That is okay. I found that I only add more stress and pressure on myself by trying to have it all figured out before I even begin painting. It's just not worth it. And oftentimes, I find an idea mid-paint job that really excites me, and I'd never be open to that if I had it all planned out and never deviated from that plan. In general, I'm just using paint mixes with more yellows and oranges in them that are higher up on the model. And as I go down towards his waist, I'm using more rich browns and reds. He's got a gnarled, almost emaciated looking chest and stomach with protruding muscles that I want to accentuate. So I push in more purples here for this area to get this initial color sketch in that feeling of nastiness. This part of the paint job is just about laying down big sections of color over a big model. It's about mapping generally where I think things should go. It's not about worrying about details or finalizing anything in the decision-making process here. It is important to note that a lot of this skin will be covered by a cowl, shoulder armor, and scarf that Visic is wearing, which is all the more reason not to worry too much about refining here in this early stage. I can go back in with the colors already on my palette to start doing some vague refining of highlighted areas and shadows because I already got those colors out and I might as well use them. before they go to waste. One thing that's taken me a while to grasp and I want to share with you about painting for Golden Demon is that every step of the paint job does not need to be approached as if you're painting for a competition. I'd follow the same approach of base coating with interesting colors with a big brush if I was just painting Visic for a couple day paint job for my army. This is just basic foundation work, and those models that I've painted earlier in the year, like the Skaven army that I've started, have given me the reps to really help me out here in this painting approach. And this mindset of just starting painting and worrying about refining and making it competition worthy later is more akin to the origins of what Golden Demon started as. Back in its early days, gamers and hobbyists attended these Warhammer events that happened to have a Golden Demon competition and just entered the models of their army that they were most proud of. And Golden Demon has evolved a lot since those days, many of those ways for the better. I think the growth of this art form and the quality of the models that we see painted today and that you can learn how to paint yourselves is a testament to people really pushing themselves through competition. All right, looking at our work so far with his armor pieces back over the top, and yeah, a lot of this is covered in armor, which is good to keep in mind as we start on the next step of building up volumes and highlights with a million little lines. There are a lot of ways to build up highlights and create smooth blends on our models. I like to use texture whenever I can, especially when it's realistic to the surface that I'm painting. Visic here is covered in fur, but it's a little bit tricky because he's not sculpted as if every bit of that exposed flesh is fur. There's larger tufts of long fur in some areas, but there's also these short little strands sprinkled across the body. The way I'm interpreting this is that his entire body is covered in fur, just like a real rat, except for his bare little pink hands. But most of that fur is actually contoured over the shape of his torso and arms, so it's laying flat with only those little individual strands poking up. And because that's the way I'm interpreting it, I'm going to approach this by using thin lines to build up that fur through highlights with semi-transparent paint. Note that if I was painting this model for an army, I'd approach it largely the same way. I would just use more opaque paint, so each of these lines would be more visible and we'd build up highlights much more quickly. And here's where I remembered why large models are so much work. I mean, compare this guy's arm to a Space Marine's arm. This thing is a bit obscene. Building up faint layers to give that fur texture while building volume and highlights takes so much time. And while I'm working my way around this model, painting on these thin lines, I'm seeing other things I want to do, other colors I want to add, other steps I know I'm going to have to do in the future. And that's just making this process seem like it's taking even longer. There are parts in any paint job, especially if you're painting for competition, where you're really feeling like your motivation is all sucked away, and this is one of those times. I'd finish one layer on one arm, and then I'd realize I'd need to do 3 to 4 or more extra layers of that same color over the same arm to build up the desired effect. Oh yeah, and then I'd have to do that same process over every other section of the fur. I'm currently standing outside my studio to an expanded hobby 3D printing and storage space, and I finally decided to make this jump because of today's sponsor, FlexiSpot. And it's all because of this desk. Look, the cold hard truth is standard desks and tables that we paint at are not designed for our hobby. We really need an ideal height that's custom based on our height so we can be comfortable, we can keep our back straight, we could even stand while we have our elbows, our wrists, and our hands all locked together for the most control while we're painting our miniatures. But with FlexiSpot's adjustable desk height, I can find the perfect height for me, whether standing or sitting. I've really grown to love working with the desk at standing height, especially when I'm building models, cleaning up 3D prints, and knocking out some quick speed paints. Now, the issue I've had with standing desks in the past is they cost a buttload of money, or they're made out of incredibly flimsy material. But with FlexiSpot, it's affordable, and it can hold a lot of weight. There's no flimsy aluminum in the construction here. These things are about 3 inches of automotive grade steel, and this whole table can hold about 440 pounds. It's So if you need a desk for work, for gaming, for the hobby, for all of these things, it's the only desk you're ever gonna need to buy, and they stand behind it. It's got a 15-year full warranty and a 30-day money-back guarantee because they know you're gonna love it and they stand behind their product. And there's never been a better time to buy than right now because FlexiSpot's New Year's sale is live. You get $50 off any desk, and they've got a wide variety of work tops and lengths and widths for the desks, so no matter what your workspace, they're gonna have you covered. The discount also applies to their incredibly comfortable ergonomic chairs. Trust me, you are going to want to ditch your gaming chair and replace it with one of these. They are so much better for the miniature painting hobby. So check out the link on the screen and on the video description to get your $50 off of FlexiSpot. The hours add up fast here, and it leads us to the true secret of being a successful competition miniature painter, and it's really deceptively simple. How many hours can you commit day after day, week after week, all the while keeping your focus, motivation, and patience? That's it. That's really all it takes. Yes, the more experienced you are as a painter, the quicker you'll move through steps and the better your overall product will probably be. But you still need that mental fortitude and tons of hours. So if you've got kids, good luck. That's just the way it is. There's a reason why almost every one of the best painters in the world does not have children. It is still doable. I have a child and enter in Golden Demon, but you really have to be regimented in your schedule to balance your family life, other priorities, and still put in so many hours into a competition piece. All right, enough of the negativity. The good news is that you can push yourself a lot farther in your painting than you realize, no matter what you're looking to achieve with this simple thing: consistency. So I try to stay strong and paint consistently on this skin for a couple of days, slowly building up the highlights and defining the fur. I'd often get stuck in a zone and spend 20 minutes on a section that was going to be completely covered by the armor. The first big section of any model is going to have the most struggles like these. Because as you work through a model, each section you finish gives you some clarity on the direction you're going and makes you feel like you're getting closer and closer to the model looking impressive and, more importantly, complete. But the first section is always the hardest. I have got no frame of reference with the rest of the model. Are these highlights bright enough? Are they too bright? Are the colors actually as punchy as I think they are? Am I spending too much time on this part? Or not enough time? Who frickin' knows? I'm feeling so much uncertainty in this paint job at this part, and I'm telling you that because I feel like all of us feel that in any paint job we do at some point in it. And the point is, you're not alone. It's gonna happen. And the most important thing is you just keep your brush wet. You keep painting and you will work your way through it. You'll be a better painter with more confidence and more painting tricks in your tool belt than when you started. Now, while all this flesh is technically one connected surface, there are two areas that are going to be different: his hands and his gnarly chest. The hands are the only section that aren't covered in fur here. Actually, I'm not sure if that's correct, but that's what I'm gonna go with. But I don't want them painted so strikingly different that it looks like Vizik is wearing a sweater with just his little hands poking out. So we wanna have a transition to pure skin much more gradually. There's a bit of a sickly green mixed into the color used on his forearm, and it's similar enough that it's believable. I push more of this green with off-white for the highlights for all of those tiny wrinkles and knobby knuckles. These are some amazing details, and I really want them to stand out. But they're really not going to come to life until we add some nasty color in a little bit. But for now, we just need to lay that foundation of their details. The other unique area is his stomach, and we're going to push the purples further after we clarify the brighter sections. But much of this area is going to be covered by the armor, so I have to stop myself from spending too much time painting all of it. Now we get to move on to the fun part, the reason why I love painting big models, and that is adding all sorts of interesting color depth and realism through colorful glazes. Whenever I do this, I start by working with very thin glazes. I wick most of the moisture off of my brush before I ever touch the model. I don't want to cover up all that detail work I just spent so much time on. And I can always add more layers of the glaze later, or I can make the glaze stronger by adding a bit more of the paint into the mixture. Once I get to this step, I'll often go back and forth between adding some colorful glazes and then redoing the highlights and pushing them a bit more and back and forth. This really helps me see how this finalized section is going to look. But while working on this model, I remembered a very dangerous situation you can get into, and that is tunnel vision, because this thing is the size of a frickin' Ninja Turtle action figure from the 90s. So you can't see how every small section you're painting fits into everything else you've painted in the middle of the process. I like to work on one section for a bit, then roll my chair back away from my painting desk, look at the model just in the reflection of my painting light, and see how it all fits together, then go back to work. You need to always be checking how the larger model fits with the individual sections you're painting. By moving around from section to section, building each one up bit by bit, I'm a lot less likely to go way off track in one area. I also find I get less bored and mentally strained as long as I'm moving around the model to whichever area catches my interest and engages me at the time. I'm really feeling like the red browns, the reds, and the purples I'm pulling in on this fur is bringing it more to life, and I'm starting to get excited by the direction we're headed. Up until this point, I was really questioning myself on this paint job. I'm still not super confident that it's all going to be good enough when it's all done, but at least at this point, I'm having fun and I'm getting a little bit of reassurance. I remind myself in every paint job, there is a part where it looks like ass and you're going to want to give up. And the only thing that you can do to work through that is just keep painting. I've already had a few of those moments on this model, and I know there's going to be more. But every time I just keep working and pushing through this ass phase of the model, I silence those negative voices. It's about at this point in the paint job where I find myself face to face with another failure, and that is the realization that I'm not going to get this skin 100% complete before this video needs to come out. And that's one of the many struggles I've learned through documenting my Golden Demon journey through videos. Sometimes things take longer than anticipated. Sometimes I think of other things that need to be done that I hadn't prepared for. Sometimes new steps arise and I know they're going to make the model look that much better, and I don't have enough hours in the week to get those things done and still get the video out. But the good news is I typically only try to get my models painted to about 80 to 90% before I move on to the next section anyway. I leave that last 10 to 15% of a model's paint job at the very end to make sure everything works together as a whole. Maybe once the shoulder armor is on and painted, I'll see other tweaks I need to make on the skin. Maybe the color of his skirt will influence what other glazes I want to add to the fur. Best not to make all the decisions before I don't have access to all of the variables at hand. I did want to make sure that at this point we do add more of that nastiness in the red around the knuckles and the hands to help bring those to life, to feel that warmth underneath that green skin. I just realized that we almost made it through this entire video without me talking about one of the most difficult aspects of painting a large model. It is so much harder to paint a big model with precision. The model is huge, it's awkward to hold, and you don't want to get your greasy hands all wrapped around it, but just by holding it by a little painting handle does not give you enough control for your wrists, your hands, anything. Like, it definitely still feels like I'm painting Warhammer, but it also does not feel like I'm painting Warhammer. It's kind of like when you're painting a Space Marine and then you go over and you paint a Rhino tank. Yeah, they're both still Warhammer, but they're totally different animals. Don't get me wrong, painting big models isn't worse than painting regular 32mm models. It's just different, and there's so much stuff that I really love in painting a large model compared to painting a normal size one. So if you haven't painted a large model before, or it's been a while since you have, please get back to one. Get it on your desk. You are gonna have so much fun because it's so much more freeing because you actually have space to work. Speaking of work, here is where we're at with our week's worth of work on this skin. Now, the one thing that I'm realizing is looking at this skin is that this model is going to take me so many more hours. Is it worth it? Is all this stress and pressure and hours and painstaking painting worth it? Well, for me, absolutely. Absolutely it is. But I'm a bit of a masochist, so regardless of if you ever decide to enter a painting competition like Golden Demon, I do think each of us should try as hard as we can at least once a year in a paint job. And each year, you'll see in a single mini how much you've grown from the year before. And that is my 2025 challenge to you. In this month, paint one model to the best of your abilities. Try your hardest. And don't set an hour limit. Don't set any unrealistic expectations. Just push yourself outside of your comfortable zone of painting and see how well you can do. Thanks for hanging out today. I appreciate you being a part of this 2025 Golden Demon journey of mine. And like it or not, there's going to be more videos in this series over the next couple of months because that's the only possible way I'm going to find enough hours to get this thing painted for Adepticon. If you like this video or other videos of mine, please subscribe to the channel. It means a lot. A lot of you aren't subscribed, and I really want you with us. And if you wanted to support the channel in another way, you could become touched by an angel by joining the Ninja on Patreon. I'm not the angel in this situation. Join the other amazing ninjas we've got over there on our Discord where we help each other with paint jobs and just chat about the hobby. We just finished up our first Ninja Fantasy Football League, and guess who won? This guy. I also have my every Wednesday behind the scenes vlog style videos to talk about things in the hobby and what's going on my painting desk. Don't worry, I'm going to be back next week with another painting video about something a little bit less stressful, but no less badass. Just make sure that between now and then you find time in your day to slay the gray.